You are listening to the Enormocast.
Squama by Sportiva. A shoe for climbers who are not afraid to ascend. Climbing obsession.
Why are you so obsessed?
Squama. Squama vegan. Precision. Stability. Squama vegan. Skin-like.
Why are you so obsessed?
What would you do for the send?
What would you do for the send?
Squama by Sportiva. Squama.
What would you do for the send?
Elevate your sending with the Squama, and elevate your consciousness with the Squama vegan. All the sending without the animal-derived materials. Find the Squama at Sportiva.com or your favorite local shop. Squama.
What would you do for the send?
All right, folks, get ready. Our climbers have been out all day, and whether they summited or plummeted, they're going to need an ice-cold beer to either celebrate or drown their sorrows.
Excusez-moi, what if they don't drink the alcohol?
What are you talking about, LaCroix? Post-climbing beers is a tradition as old as Jim Donini's Polypro undies.
Écoutez-moi, paysan. Je m'appelle Lacroix.
LaCroix? Aren't you from Wisconsin, boy?
Wait, who told you that?
You never mind. Topo Chico, you back there?
Estoy aquí, manito.
L8? Well, them climbers want a boozy libation like me, or just refreshing, clean living effervescence. Another thing we can all agree on is this Yeti Tundra cooler is keeping us colder than a polar bear's toenails.
Ice cold.
Sturdier than a 3-bolt quad anchor backed up with a pink tri-cam. A Yeti Tundra cooler will outlast just about any gear in a climber's kit. Hell, that can of tomato juice over there has been rattling around in here for years.
Somebody kill me.
So before some of us get popped and swilled, just remember one thing. Without this Yeti Tundra cooler, we'd all be sloshed around in bath-warm broccoli cheese water by now. So if climbers know what's what, they'll check out all the sizes of the Yeti Tundra cooler at Yeti.com or their favorite outdoor retailer. And let Yeti finish every best day ever with cold drinks and high fives.
Listen, where are you playing in town? Are you playing here?
We're doing the Enormo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
big
big
house.
place,
We sold
that
it
side
out.
of town. That's a
Very
big
nice.
place. You sold
What's
it
that,
out.
20,006?
I'll see.
You really should.
Look, you better get up there before you panic. Those pens are loose. You're very good. I have really enjoyed climbing with you. We'll make it. I don't think so. But we shall continue with style.
Bad weather. Now or later, anytime for climbing.
Today's show is brought to you by Black Diamond Equipment, La Sportiva, and with support from Maxim Ropes. Maxim has been keeping the Enormocast off the deck since 2012.
And now we can also thank the chill folks at Yeti. And don't forget our charter sponsor, Bonfire Coffee. Go to bonfirecoffee.com and enter Enormo at checkout to get a great deal on great coffee and to support the Enormocast.
And now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Enormocast. This is your host, Chris Kalous. It is July 9th, 2024, about 10:30 p.m. here in Colorado. And this is episode 288 of the Enormocast, a conversation with second-time guest and author of the book Vertical Mind, Don McGrath. Yeah, Don was on the show back in the olden times, 2014, a decade ago, back when I had to explain what a podcast was, when I asked somebody to sit inside of my little RV and record something, those halcyon days back at the beginning. Don was an early adopter He's kind of revitalizing his role as the Vertical Mind guy. So I wanted to talk to him about what has happened for the last 10 years and what he's doing currently. But before that, I want to just say a few words about John Middendorf. Some of you might know that John Middendorf passed away in his sleep last month at the age of 65, which was a terrible surprise and a big shock, I think, to everyone. John was an incredible big wall climber, hyper-intelligent gear designer, loving husband and father, and above all, I think it was John's sweet nature and curiosity that made him stand out. As you longtime listeners know, he appeared on the podcast in 2017 with stories of his wild adventures on Trango, El Cap, and beyond, and it was kind of the beginning of a new phase of his contribution to climbing with D4 portal edges. Incidentally, one of which kept me and my partner Steve Dilk safe during several days of storm on our Golden Gate ascent on El Cap, which is also documented on this podcast. Which is to say, thanks, John. Your designs and trailblazing set so many other people on the adventurous path, kept them safe in the worst situations, and helped them weather the storms. We owe you, Deucey. R.I.P., my friend. And I encourage you guys to go back and listen to that podcast with John. His personality really comes through. Great stories, great man. And finally, my condolences to his family. Must be the hardest thing. All right, to the interview with Don McGrath. You know I don't do the training thing here very often. So many other people, most of them friends of mine, do it so much better. However, this whole thing with controlling your mind or using your mind to help improve the way you approach climbing, that's actually really interesting to me. Don was sort of early to that mode. I think mind coaching is quite popular now, but he was on his own a little bit back then. Arno Ilgner was around, training beta, dabbled in it. Anyway, it was good to touch base. He's also aging, which we talk a little bit about that. That's something I'm facing. Some of you guys are facing. Something you all will face. I know it's hard to believe. I didn't fucking believe it. Or maybe I didn't think I'd make it this far. I don't know. Anyhow, it's all here. It's a lot of fun. It starts cooking after we get the preliminaries out of the way. So check this out, a re-conversation with the author of Vertical Mind, Don McGrath. Man alive, did summer ever show up? And what's a climber to do when lounging at the lake/river/beach gets mind-numbingly boring after a couple dips and half a chapter of that classic you've sworn to read for the last 8 years to impress your mates? Ahoy, Ahab. What's this about whale anatomy again? So even though the orb is out there waiting to suck the life from you like an empty snakeskin, a climbing we will go because, well, it's really all we have. But Black Diamond has your sun-kissed back with apparel to kit the heat. Cover up to cool down with the Alpenglow hoodie. Get a little Stone Master retro with the corduroy dirtbag shorts. Sun's out, guns out with the Women's Project muscle tee because, well, who doesn't like sweaty muscles? And don't sleep on a cotton hoodie for when the sun finally, thankfully, goes down. Black Diamond knows we're not smart enough to stay off those skillet hot rocks in summer, so help is on the way. Check out all the summer climbing apparel at blackdiamondequipment.com or your favorite local shop. And do your best to stay cool with BD. But yeah, welcome back, Don. You were an early guest on the Enormocast. You were an early adopter, as it were. I think, if I remember right, we did an interview in Rifle in the old mobile studio, parked on the side of the road. Is that right?
We started out in the campground, and the river was too loud.
Right.
So we got in your little mobile studio, and we drove up almost to the forest.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting in there, and that was a long time. That was 10 years ago.
Yeah, so that was early on, 2014. I think I only been doing it 2 years. It was episode 61. One of the distinctions of the Enormocast that still holds true is that I was one of the first to the block as far as doing a climbing podcast. I was not the first, nor was the Enormocast my first attempt at it, actually. but kind of sealed myself as kind of an original there. And also, your book, The Vertical Mind, had come out, and I think you were also kind of like on the first wave of this idea of mental training, of looking at kind of the roadblocks that our brain it puts in front of us as far as climbing is concerned. Again, not necessarily the first. Arno was out there with his program already and stuff like that, but an early adopter. So let's talk a little bit about the history of that book. Yeah, in the last 10 years of out there promoting these ideas and digging into new ideas around the way we think about climbing.
Yeah, and I want to say congratulations. You're up to what, 277? I think I saw 277, something like that. I mean, that's amazing. So congrats.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's fantastic. So yeah, I remember we were both climbing in rifle.
Yep.
And that's where Vertical Mind really got its genesis. Mm-hmm. I have been doing some research on myself because climbing in rifle, what I was finding is I would one hang things way too many times. And then when I would do it, it would either seem easy or sometimes I did things twice in the same day. And I began to realize that I probably was strong enough physically a month ago, right? A month before, but it was really what was between my ears. It was really something, and I didn't understand it. So I began researching it, writing articles. I had a blog for a while, and I had the good fortune of climbing a weekend in rifle with Jeff Ellison, who's a psychology professor from Adams State. And so we're sitting there, we had a great day climbing, and we're drinking his margaritas, in the campground, and be careful of his margaritas. All I got to say, if he gives you a margarita, one might be enough. But we were having.
Or you end up writing a book.
Yeah, we end up writing a book.
It could go either way.
He started, or you end up writing a book.
You either end up face down in a ditch or you write a book. It's one or the other.
Well, the second day, I didn't roll out of my car camper till 10 a.m. and everybody else was gone. But in the process, Jeff was telling me about his research, and by the end of the weekend, we decided we were going to write something. We didn't know it was called Vertical Mind. And then we had a few calls, and I think it was 9 months later, we submitted a manuscript to Fred Knapp at Sharp End, and he absolutely loved it. So that's kind of how it got started there, very organically in rifle.
It's something obviously that everybody has thought about and has run into these roadblocks. And it's really, I think, like I said, in the last, I guess it's been 10 years since you were on the show, and this project started a couple years before that. That we've been kind of formally thinking about it a lot, and applying outside kind of knowledge to what we do in climbing. And I think the training end of things, the physical training end of things has also had that same process in the last decade, where we were kind of shooting around in the dark and then started to think about it more, I guess, eloquently and with more information. So, tell me about your own path as far as using some of this information. You obviously wrote it as much for yourself as for other people, or at least you researched it for yourself. So tell me a little bit about your pathway with what you learned and what you were able to apply kind of immediately to the way you were climbing.
Yeah, it kind of started out of selfishness. Really, it started out of selfishness. I was trying to become a better climber, and I read pretty much everything I could read. I've got a PhD, so I'll read everything, right? I research and stuff about running and sports psychology and confidence and all these things. And one of the things that really struck me was being in the moment, just being in the moment. And I got thinking about that. Really, when I coach people, this is the number one thing that I coach them on that I see has almost immediate effect is one move at a time. And so I began practicing on myself, climbing in the moment. And by that, I mean, when I grab a hold, I would just geek out on it, get so deep in it. How does that feel? Finding the perfect way to get the thumb catch and really just going very, very deep and really working on my mindset of staying in the moment. And I found that I remember I've been practicing this for maybe a month or so. And I went with a friend of mine to Cayman Brack, and we were climbing at Dixon's Wall. And I did this 12B second try. And I didn't do that. That wasn't what Don McGrath could do at the time. And so that really pointed out to me the power of this, right? And that's just one example of just one move at a time, staying in the moment. What's behind you doesn't matter. What's ahead of you doesn't matter. The more you can stay in that moment, climbing one move at a time, the better you're going to climb. So that was like my big wake up call. It's like, wow, there's really something here. And that's when I really started digging in and reading more and experimenting more. And to this day, I use that in my coaching. I use that in myself. And hey, I may know a lot about this, but it doesn't mean I use it all the time. I fall off the wagon, and I've got times, the life gets busy. I get away from climbing for a little bit, or I get sick, or I get sloppy, and I bring myself back and I start doing some of these drills, and I see those same payoffs.
One of the other like kind of trends, or I guess there's been a proliferation of coaching around controlling fear. So Vertical Mind, I mean, that was this much bigger kind of talk in there. I know fear is a part of it, but what do you think in terms of like your clinics or the people that approach you or your methods? Like how much of it is about training through fear, and how much of it is sort of other techniques or other boundaries?
I mean, certainly fear is something we talk about in Vertical Mind. I mean, it's something that's very, very common for climbers. Specifically, we talk about fear of falling and fear of failure, which are two different types of fear that can hold climbers back. But I think one of the big things we do that's has made us a little bit different, and I'm sure other people have probably done it, is what's the science behind cognitive learning? We introduced this concept of schema, which are how your brain recognizes these patterns. Like you recognize when you're in a situation by visual cues that your brain just filters and knows immediately and puts some kind of a tag on it, based upon your memories and your life experiences. And then there's scripts, which are these automatic things that come out of your subconscious that when you're in a given situation, they play out automatically. And all of us have these scripts. 90% of what we do is run off of scripts, right? We don't have to think about brushing our teeth. We just brush our teeth. So I think giving people an understanding of these psychological processes and then why training works. Like I want to know, I understand not just what to do, but why. Like, why am I doing this? Like, what am I actually doing? And these are well-known psychological concepts that I think we do a pretty good job of explaining, giving the context, and then drills around those to help you overcome whatever the challenge you're having is.
Yeah, and I was thinking too about how like those scripts, and that's a good way to even think about what I was trying to figure out is we also have these notions of sort of who we are, and you and I, as you know, we're both growing older, but we're still trying to climb and still trying to perform, and you know that comes with all sorts of other issues. But you know, this idea of who you are as a climber kind of gets cemented as well, and you know, for better and worse at certain times. And I was thinking about myself and how recently, you know, I don't think much has changed in my life, but I've noticed that I'm not climbing above my gear, and I'm getting gripped, especially with trad climbing, like climbing above cams or whatever. And it's kind of been a thing where I've finally had to step back and say, okay, well, you have this notion of you as this like relatively bold climber, or at least like a proficient trad climber that can, you know, allow his feet above the gear, you know, at the very least, not run out. But as soon as my waist gets above the gear, I start to get a little jittery. And so it's like I've just recently, I said to my wife on a trip I was going down to climb in Indian Creek, I'm like, I just want to go out and like fall on my cams because I seem to have lost that ability. And it's like I changed, and I haven't sort of acknowledged that. And I finally had this moment where I'm like, I think I need to go back to the drawing board here and take some whippers, even just practice falls, which I was like, I thought I was way beyond, you know, practice falling onto gear, like, you know, years ago. But here I am again. Like, you know, this script has changed in a way, and I haven't like noticed it. And I need to go back to the drawing board and do a little training, I think, if I can. I mean, I'm going to find out if I can get up above gear at all and leap off or not.
Yeah, well, they drift, right?
Yeah.
They drift. And like I said before, like I have to go back and do my training. Like every once in a while, I got to go back when I find out that, gosh, I haven't been climbing outside very much. It's very different than climbing in the gym, very different trad climbing. So you gotta strengthen those scripts again. The good news is they're much easier to get back than they are to formulate in the beginning. You know, I don't think it'll take a heck of a lot, but they drift. So my guess is you now have drifted away from the cemented belief that you can climb comfortably above your gear. There's some doubt in there somewhere. Your belief has been eroded. You're like, well, what if I fall? Am I going to get hurt? I got a kid now. There's things that shape our beliefs. And so, I think just going back and building up a little arsenal of uneventful falls, all of a sudden you'll be like, you'll get that script back pretty quickly. They reform pretty quickly.
So 10 years has gone by, as I mentioned in the beginning, and obviously you've learned a lot more since Vertical Mind came out. Tell me a little bit about that, about sort of your progress as a coach with other people, your progress with yourself over the last few years. Is there certain insights you can point to that maybe have been more significant than others since the book was written and since you sort of embarked on this mission? Because it's funny, because with these sorts of things, it becomes a mission to sort of change everybody's lives for the better. And I think you've been on that mission for 10 years as a coach.
Yeah, you just want to help people so they don't have to take the long road. So I guess there's a couple of things. One thing that I've seen in my workshops, that the most impactful thing, and it seems like a silly thing, but I've just seen it work over and over again. In my workshops, I teach the pre-climb ritual, because one of the things that happens to us is, we'll go climbing on any given day. Some days we have good days. Some days we have bad days. Some days we're more nervous when we're climbing. Some days we say, oh, I ate a bad burrito. I don't feel so good today. And our motivation and our fun can actually fluctuate with that. And one of the big things is getting in the right state of mind when you start a climb. Getting in a consistent state of mind when you start a climb. And that usually wants to be a pretty calm state of mind. You usually want to be kind of, unless you're doing some big dyno right off the deck, you want to be kind of a calm state of mind, not distracted, very, very focused on what you're doing, breathing. So there's a series of things I teach in my workshops about the pre-climb ritual and what to do to get to that state. It involves breathing. It involves a safety check. It involves thought replacement. Like mine is one move at a time. So as soon as I am up, as soon as I'm up climbing, I start driving out all those negative thoughts like, oh, the knee bar is going to hurt this time, or, oh, it could be a scary fall up there. The crux is really hard. It's just astounding what some simple things can make a huge difference for people. And I've seen in a couple hours, these things help people in their climbing. So that's one. That's been astounding. That just such a simple thing is creating and practicing a pre-climb ritual. And what I ask people to do is do it on every climb. A warm up, everything. Practice all this stuff in your warm-ups. We don't learn to play the piano on the stage at the Grand Ole Opry. We learn in a safe environment where we can practice slowly and deliberately and mindfully. So that's kind of, it may seem like a silly thing, but having people who religiously use a pre-climb ritual, they find a big difference in their ability to climb and get more joy out of their climbing on a climbing day.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to kind of like, again, I mean, going back to, I guess, my, preconceived notions is like, yeah, like all that would seem to me, or would have seemed to me like kind of flim flam, like, oh yeah, whatever, like, just I'm tied in, I'm going climbing, I don't have to do all these sorts of things as part of my climbing day. And do you find it like tricky to convince like jerks like me to I guess if people are coming to you, they want stuff, but
yeah, no, I don't spend any time
getting over
somebody who doesn't want to try something new. That's a waste of my breath. And in fact, I do very little coaching now because I want to climb. I'm kind of 60 something. I only got so many climbing tickets left. I only got so many tickets in a week. So I'll usually coach people if I do a workshop. I don't do those that often, or if somebody reaches out to me. Sometimes, like I had this mother of a 10-year-old competition climber reach out to me and say, "Hey, my son gets really nervous and distracted. Can you help him?" And I was like, "Okay." So I helped them. I don't waste any time trying to convince anybody to do anything. I want people coming with the open mind that I'll try this, and in my workshops, I'm like, listen, these are things that you can try. I'm going to, in 3 or 4 hours, I usually give a lot of things, right? There's way more. And I say, if you just take just one thing that makes sense for you and everything else throw away, like you can throw it all away, but just be open and try it. And those are the people I want in my workshops, and they're the ones who see the benefit.
Do you still do workshops then?
Yeah, once in a while.
Okay, just not straight up coaching.
Yeah, and coaching, I just don't. It's very, very time consuming, and
right.
I feel bad because it may sound weird, but my time is too valuable.
Yeah, sure.
And
sure.
I feel bad charging people that much money because it's I don't know. So I do.
Your heart's not in it, so yeah.
Yeah, I do workshops. I really enjoy that.
Right.
I did a talk yesterday. I love teaching people things.
Mm-hmm.
Coaching I do on a very, very select basis. I have people reach out to me probably every month, and I ask them a few questions. I ask them how committed they are. I ask a little bit about their background, and pretty quickly we decide whether it's a good fit or not. It's usually not.
Well, I've been thinking about this thing, and this may be a total tangent, but, I don't know what your insights are. And I think it was actually Hazel that I had someone on that was talking about this idea of like a lot of climbers don't seem to actually enjoy climbing or like think climbing is all that fun. Every time they sort of arrive at the crag, it's this crucible on which they're going to test themselves. And I'm not even talking about projecting. I'm just talking about, for a lot of people, like going climbing is filled with kind of, hurdles, all sorts of hurdles. And whatever attraction they have to it isn't about going out and having fun, but about going out and sort of like, what is my day going to like challenge me with? And I just find it really interesting. I was just recently talking to someone about it, how like I noticed at a crowded cliff that like a lot of people really just weren't that into the climbing. Like, they were into their being a climber and stuff, but or not very many people were like whooping it up and having a good time. Like, where does like this idea of moving away from this kind of, always testing yourself, always pushing yourself, always trying to overcome these things, to just having fun and remembering that it's like a fun activity that you don't have to do. No one is forcing you to go out there and get scared and feel like a failure. Like, where does this trying to preach, like, have a good time? Does that fit into sort of your coaching?
Let's face it, climbing is a meaningless activity.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of very selfish and very kind of meaningless, right? It's really, sure. if you're not doing it for fun, you kind of not only miss the ball, you miss the whole game. The subtitle of Vertical Mind is Psychological Approaches for Optimal Rock Climbing. Mm-hmm. Not difficult rock climbing, optimal rock climbing. We actually talk a lot about fun. And what's the psychology of fun and how to create more joy and fun in your climbing. And when you can reduce the anxiety, you tend to have more fun. Like that pre-climb ritual is about really managing that anxiety. So when you start the climb, you're actually in a much better state. So I think it's extremely important. And I think, and maybe this is why I've seen so much energy around Vertical Mind the past couple of years. And that's kind of why I'm doing this again, right? I kind of did a bunch of stuff when the book first came out, and then I kind of went to sleep on it. And I retired from my job, and I've been trying to figure out what I want to do with my time besides climb and eat and sleep and have fun with my wife.
That's it. So, I think that's enough, actually.
So
now you've added one more thing, but anyway, keep going.
There's a lot of energy around it. And I think there's a whole... let's face it, when we started climbing, you got into climbing because you knew a climber or you were involved in the outdoors and you saw climbing as something that seemed sensible, right? Mm-hmm. And so that was pretty narrowing. The personalities of people who started climbing 10, 20, 30 years ago was a very narrow type of person. And now with 1,000 people a day being introduced to climbing gyms in the US alone, there's a whole group of new people with whole different backgrounds. And many of them, they don't enter it wanting to climb hard at all. Like they use it for exercises. They do it because, they didn't like their old gym, or they got tired of Pilates, or and a friend brought them and they were like, wow, this is really cool. So I think there's a lot more people who they just do it for fun and they want to know, how do I do it for fun, yet manage these things that come with it, which is fear of falling. Right, which is fear of failure, which is these automatic things that at some point they encounter in their journey.
Yeah, well, to me, it's a real paradox that I've come to accept. And actually, maybe the podcast has been a desire to sort of sort this out. But I can go there, I can sit in front of you and be like, people should be having fun climbing. But I know my own experience with it is that if it was just dumb fun, I wouldn't be interested in it. And you can go and bungee jump, right? That's like a classic, like dumb fun thing where you can get a little thrill and walk away like laughing. But like to me, at least the challenge and the knockdowns, if you will, and the times when I do actually get pushed beyond my comfort zone and maybe also get pushed to where I do feel like something of a failure that day, like those things are also this really important ingredient to climbing. Climbing would not be interesting to me if we were just goofing around out there all the time.
Well, it's
like this weird balance or this weird mix, and so I can't always tell people like, you should just have fun, because I mean, and then we get into, if we want to get into sort of big climbing, the suffering is certainly an ingredient that is an important part of it to any alpinist, So anyway, I'll let you comment on that, but it's this heady mix, and without the heady mix, it wouldn't be what it is.
Well, two things come to mind from what you said. One is, and we actually talk a lot about this in Vertical Mind, we talk about motivation. And, there's a flavor of happiness that comes, we call it probably more like fulfillment is probably maybe a better word, right? And that's driven by, we all love to master something. We all love to move along, as our human brains are this way. We love to see ourselves progress on something. It's mastery motivation drives a lot of us. Like we love feeling what it's like to be able to hike something we couldn't hike before, be able to, play an instrument that we haven't been able to play, practice for a long time and then eventually perform a concert. So there's parts of our brain that just love that. And so I still label that fun. It's kind of fulfillment, right?
Right.
So like I went out yesterday, my wife and I went to Shelf Road, and we just wanted to get out because the weather is going to be crappy the next 2 weeks. So we went there and we tried to get away from the crowds, and we did a bunch of stuff we hadn't done before. We didn't do anything difficult, but I loved getting on these climbs, just walking up to them, never been on them, and just do them, just feeling great. And it was mastery motivation. Like just the fact that I could walk up to this thing and just feel great on site it, and just, it challenged me a little bit enough to make it interesting and to feel that mastery motivation. But yeah, so there's a certain flavor of fun that is in that mastery motivation. Does that make sense?
Totally. I mean, this proliferation of what's become a meme, and a meme in the sort of old school sense, not just a picture on Instagram, but the meme of the type 1, 2, 3 fun thing. Yeah. Like, that seems like it's always been here, but I think that like started to appear about 10 years ago, this way of signifying, I was type 2 fun or whatever. And I think it's funny because it's this kind of joke, and it's this meme that's gone through not just climbing, but all types of, I think, outdoor activities. But it's also like embedded in it, and maybe this is why it caught on so much, is this like what you're talking about. So it's kind of fascinating that like this little thing that we toss off, oh, it was type 2 fun or whatever, is actually like, you could probably do a psychology thesis on it if you wanted to, because it's all in there, what we're talking about.
I really think the more emotional something is, the easier it is to connect with that memory. Okay. So think about like the times of great successes or the times of most misery. You'll remember that, right? It'll bring you back. You'd almost have the smells of it. It's almost spooky, right? You could almost feel whatever the feeling was at that time. So the more emotional something is, the more that memory is easy to recall, and the more physical you feel that memory. Mm-hmm. And so there's some psychology around that. So in this type 2 fun situation, like I was just out in Red Rocks climbing with an old mentor of mine, and we were up on this route, and we were in the shade, and it was only like 50 something degrees, and it was 40-mile-an-hour gusts, and we were getting blasted up there.
I bet I was 2 canyons over from you that same day. But anyway, keep going. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was really, really brutal. Like, yeah. And so, but I will remember that. Like, I will remember that. I could almost picture the belay. Like, I could picture being there. I not exactly what slings I was using, but it's close. So I think that's one of the reasons we like this type 2 fun, is it creates unbelievably vivid memories. And think about the stories you tell, right? I still tell stories of type 2 fun from 20 years ago, and I can get right back there. And so that's one of the reasons I think we like it, is it just brings back those It brings us back there so vividly.
All right, well, let me throw this one at you. We're a little bit away from the vertical mind, but just your expertise is in this stuff, and your writing partner Jeff's expertise. So this idea of like your reflective group, I think a very difficult thing to get past in climbing is comparison, and what your group is doing versus what you're doing, what the greater climbing world is doing versus who you are as a climber. We were talking about how we met in rifle, and rifle's, this important place for us as our progression as climbers, but it's a very difficult place to walk into as a newer or a climber that's climbing 510. I mean, literally it's not great for that, but so what do you kind of do and sort of like preach as far as that world is concerned? Because it's really difficult to get around, knowing, I mean, you go in and when you go to climb 511 in a place that's a sport climbing area, not just rifle, but all over, there is this idea that you're on the warm up, and there's people standing in line waiting for you to get done so they can warm
and God
up.
Forbid you hang on it.
I know. And it may not be a warm up for you. And that's my whole point. And I, you and I have watched this happen at the meets, right? The infamous like 511 warm ups in rifle, where someone is up there working on it and everybody's grumbling, or maybe not literally, but the person up there thinks they hear them grumbling.
That's the difference. Okay,
yeah.
so so
anyway, where do you go with like your? It's actually the reference group. That's the word I was looking for. This idea of comparing yourself and being in the mix as a climber, because it's definitely a brutal part of our sport.
So here's the thing: is we are human animals, and there's part of our brain also. The reason we're still here is we are social creatures, and we live for hundreds or maybe thousands of years. We've lived in tribes, right? We've lived in social situations where if we got expelled from the tribe, what would happen to us?
You'd be dead.
You'd be dead, right?
The saber-tooth would munch you
down.
The saber-tooth
or some other tribe would come and take your stuff and kill you and eat you. I don't know. But yeah, so it's, it's part of our DNA to want to be accepted. They in pop psychology is, we all want to be accepted. Well, that's true. We all do want to be accepted, and it's wired, right? So you can't feel bad about that. We're wired that way. The reality is nobody cares. I mean, in a climbing context, nobody really cares. And I was given a talk up at the BRC, maybe it was a year ago or so, and I asked, about scripts and, some things that are holding people back. And one guy was like, he climbed in rifle, and he just started climbing there, and he was training, and he wanted to get on Pumperama, but he's like, man, I would get there and I'd see, there'd be a line, and I see people doing it like as a warm up and monkey hanging, like all this stuff, right? So. And he said, I just don't want people to think more of me, to think less of me, right? And I had to give him the tough love. I was like, nobody cares. And nobody cares. No, they don't. When they're at home having their favorite beverage, whether it be a tea or whether it be an adult beverage, they can be thinking about you.
No,
we all live in our own bubbles, right? The only thing is they might think, they might watch you struggle on something and think, oh, I remember when I first struggled on that. Most likely they'd be saying, hey, dude, awesome. Way to work, right? That's what people really are saying, more likely. Once in a while, you might get a snarky person who's like, oh, God, I get off that thing. I'm losing my warm-up. But they're thinking about them.
Right.
It's not directed at you.
Right.
It's really directed at them. So people really don't care. And I think just coming to that recollection that, we all live in our own bubbles. You may think, here's the thing, if you're thinking that you know what someone else is thinking, you are 100% wrong. Right. You are 100% wrong. There's zero chance you're going to be right. And so why think that they're thinking something that holds you back? Why put that in their mind when there's like 100% chance that's not there? They're thinking about, when are they hungry? When are they going to get rest? I hope they get a campsite tonight. They're thinking of a million other things, not you.
No, it's funny because I've had that conversation, and the exact one, like actually with my wife, because she sort of has, she kind of has this ambivalent attitude to rifle, and kind of says she feels that, and I'm like, no one like that's. I'm like, no one cares. Like, and in fact, what I realize is that maybe that's the problem. Is not necessarily her, but people want us to care, and we don't. Like, you know what I mean? Like you said, the tough love is that, yeah, we, you know, whatever you're doing over there on your climb, we're not watching, we're not caring. If we glance up there, it's just, you know, it was because we're bored and we're just looking around, you know, like, and that's kind of the funny thing is I was like, well, maybe that's the problem. They want us to care.
Comparison is a loser. Comparison's a loser. No matter what. Like, no matter what you compare, money, cars, like blah, blah, name it. Whatever you want to compare yourself with, there's somebody who's got like way more of it, whether it be, and way less of it, right? So comparing, it's a total losing game. It's like you never get fulfilled with comparison. And in fact, that could be one of the reasons this pre-climb ritual is so effective, because one of the things is like the slot replacement. So when you get up, which for many people is they start putting their shoes on or something, right? Having the slot replacement of one move at a time, one move at a time, one move at a time, you can only have one thought at a time. So you're pushing out, oh, what are people going to think of me? Oh, do I really belong on this route? You know, how am I going to make it all the way up it? There's hanging draws. Who cares? There's chains on the thing. Who cares? So I think this pushes away all those things and gives you a moment, an island where you can just climb, you can just be, right? And so I think that may be one of the reasons this technique works pretty darn well.
Also, and I like how you were talking about how your own training in this ebbs and flows and you have to go back to it and everything else, because, you know, I'm acting like I am, you know, this wise person that knows about this and doesn't do it. But of course, like there's like just the other day, someone was like, well, why don't you try this route? And I was like, yeah, that's like the scene right there. And I just don't like climbing in that zone where it's like the total scene where, you know, and we can think, we don't need to keep referencing specific things to rifle because it happens in any sport climbing area. Or any area really, there's like these places where everybody's banging it out and it's like a big group, and I tend to avoid those places. But it seems like if I had like a very solid, you know, ability of what you're talking about, I could walk into those places and maybe become an island and climb where all the banter's going on and all the blah 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 and all the, do you know what I mean? Like maybe I could become this person if I was had a better pre-climb ritual, but it's hard.
You could be, but you also have to be true to what you want to do,
right? And
be really clear. It's like I was just editing an interview I had with Mark Houdon for the podcast, and one of his Houdonisms is, "If it ain't fun, it ain't done." And you just got to. Do I want to do that? Like truthfully, do I just want to be around that many people? And that's outside of your own worrying about what they're going to think. There could just be a proximity thing. Like, I just don't like the noise. I don't like the chatter. There's other places to go. So now if there were a route there that you really wanted to do and that crowd were keeping you away, that's the time when it's like, okay, I really want to do that, but I'm being held back by this thing that I know I can work on. Well, it might be worth working on.
Let's move on to things going on in your life. And again, you've just mentioned how you've sort of come back to Vertical Mind and opened up the can of worms again, as it were. You wrote me something that said that you've done a couple days co-coaching with Hazel Finlay and working on an actual kind of pilot to, I don't know, some type of series. I don't know where it's going to appear or what it's going to be. So, and she's, you know, it's funny because she's occupied this space in the last couple of years and become, you know, one of these go-to coaches on these very issues again that you started bringing up 10 years ago. So it was a meeting of the minds, to kind of use a pun.
Yeah.
So tell me about that. Tell us about this thing and your excitement around whatever's going on with the what you call the docu-series.
So over the past, I would say 2 or 3 years, it's been a little weird. I've been at the crag and people would come up to me and like, oh, you know, I had people quote Vertical Mind at the crag. One person was like, oh, I'll either follow or I won't. And I was like, she says, I learned that from Vertical Mind. And I was like, are you kidding me? So there's been some energy around it. And it's kind of, I've been like, wow, this is really, you know, there's actually a lot of them out there now because we got the audiobook and the Kindle and it's kind of gone out there. And I have known this guy, Jay Jacoby, for about over 10 years, before I even wrote Vertical Mind. And I knew him when I wrote my first book, and he was into websites and stuff. And we've kind of stayed in contact. Well, one day he calls me up, and this was early last year, and he calls me up and he says, you know, Don, I was in a spa in Crestone, And there was a guy in there who was a climber, and he told me he and his wife had come to climb in that area. And so I said, hey, he said, hey, I know a climber. And in fact, he wrote a book, Vertical Mind. The guy goes, I love that book. Oh my God. And so Jay phones me up. He's trying to pitch me on doing a show because he's become a fan of things on Outside TV. And he was all prepared to try to sell me on doing this thing. And I was like, after 5 minutes, I was like, no, this sounds like a great idea. Let's do it. Because I'd already kind of been primed to, hey, there's a lot of energy around this right now. The climbing community is growing really quickly and people are curious about it. So we kind of put our heads together and we came up with this definition around a docuseries. And the format would be, I'd be the host and we'd have other experts like Hazel Finley on the topic of flow. I talked to Katie Brown about being the co-host for Fear of Failure. And so some of these other climbers who kind of are experts in their own right, I'm teaming up with them and we have a couple of, we call them guest climbers, so non-famous, non-experts. They come and we spend a couple of days coaching them in whatever the topic is. I did this thing with Hazel. We went out to Moab and we coached a couple of climbers about flow, who were people who were trying to find more flow in their climbing. Fantastic. Hazel is the nicest person. Yeah, she's really, really sweet, really, really smart. We had a great time coaching together. We put together this pilot. We haven't edited it yet. That's kind of on my to-do list of get that done. Because it's, I sit back and I watch it. It was one of the women wanted to start projecting. Okay. So she had been climbing 11 plus in Moab and she really wanted to start projecting 12s that she just hadn't. And she had some friction in doing so. So Hazel and I spent some time coaching her on how to do that. So it was interesting trying to apply flow to projecting because they're not usually seen this way. So Hazel and I both were able to learn ourselves a lot and shed some light onto how flow can be found in projecting and how it applies. So we just had a fantastic time. And I just got a note from this Carolyn woman. She just sent this Climb Desert Shield that we helped her to work on back in October. Yeah. So she said, hey, by the way, I went to Desert Shield and I was thinking all the things that you and Hazel coached me on. And I just sent it. I was like, oh my goodness, how cool.
Oh man. That's not like some dinky little sport climb. That's like a big, proud Indian Creek desert climb.
Yeah.
And it's also not just classic, straightforward plugging cams in and going. There's climbing in there.
This
That's
weird
awesome.
Houdini,
Congratulations, Carolyn. Is that what you said?
Weird turnaround Bombay thing.
Yeah.
And then.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. On little gear right there.
Little gear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. That's awesome. So Carolyn, is that what you said her name is?
Carolyn.
Yeah, Carolyn. Congratulations, Carolyn, if you're listening.
Yeah, Carolyn.
That's a badass send.
When I came
it's one of the proudest routes in the creek.
Yeah.
Where it sits and that upper dihedral, ridiculous. Nice job.
So that landed in my inbox about a month or so ago, and it just brought the biggest smile to my face. So that's what we're hoping to do. We're hoping to bring some expertise and share with people some coaching in this docuseries. So we did the pilot. Right now, we're in the process of looking for distribution. We've been talking to a bunch of distribution, trying to get the money to produce the rest of the things. Right. So now, since we're in that part of the journey, I was like, okay, we have this pilot, and I just decided to start a podcast. So the docuseries is titled Inside the Vertical Mind, and the podcast is Inside the Vertical Mind. And so one of the things I want to do with the podcast is I want to talk about things that are like the mental and social aspects of climbing. I'm really not focused on who's done the hardest, the newest V16, or who's done the hardest things. I'm more interested in things like how to bring more fun to your climbing. What to do after you're pregnant for women, after you're pregnant, how to get back into climbing in that situation. So bringing people with different experiences to the podcast, that's kind of what I want to do. So I've done a few episodes and I'm very excited about it.
Is it out? I mean, people you put this one out?
Yeah, I've got 3 episodes out there. I just finished editing one with Mark Houdon. We talk about his Houdonisms, his little kind of quippy sayings that are kind of fun. And I'm trying to get a couple episodes done a month.
One of the things that I kind of think about with you as this, and you're not like technically coaching, you said, anymore, but all this stuff is about sort of a broad idea of coaching, of getting people past these hurdles through your knowledge and what you know and your experience. And in coaching, or this idea of people doing this is also kind of relatively new. I mean, if you went back 20 years ago, who would we even talk about? Like Udo Newman, or John Long through his you go back even further through his How to Rock Climb series. If you're old enough to probably have devoured those. But this whole proliferation of it is very new, and it's because we have this format, this online format, to be able to do it, which is also grown in use and popularity. Hasn't been around that long. The idea of Skyping was the original kind of verb with it, but there's 80 platforms to do it now. So that's been part of it. But one of the things I enjoyed when you came out with Vertical Mind and talking to you last time is that, you aren't, no offense, and hopefully I won't offend you with this, but it's like you're not a hot shit top of the form climber, and you sort of never really were, and so it's like that perspective. I think sometimes I'm a little suspicious of these top end climbers that are going to teach someone to break through from 5'10" to 5'11". Do you even remember what that was like? Was that ever a thing for you? So many of top end climbers, they basically came out of the womb climbing pretty darn hard or pretty immediately. And I think Hazel is someone who's able to do that. In my mind, she's able to put herself empathetically in the shoes of someone that's not nearly as accomplished as she is. But I don't think all coaches are. And so is that something that you actively think about, this idea of being empathetic to those who, went through something, those who are going through something that you went through a long, long time ago? Again, no offense, Don. We're not quite in the same boat age-wise.
I've never been that hard of a climber, but I'm extremely enthusiastic. I've loved climbing for 33 years now, and there's no end in sight. And we all have our talents, right? One of my talents isn't necessarily climbing. I actually do have a pretty good talent about taking complex things and making them sound simple. And so that's what one of my goals in Vertical Mind was to make what is a very complex subject. And actually there's books written that you can barely read because the vocabulary is so difficult to get through. But through telling of the stories and a little bit of science and a little bit of practicalness, try to make it consumable for people. And so that's one of the things I enjoy. And I feel like people who aren't, in fact, I would say the people that don't want to do my workshops and stuff are the harder climbers.
Sure.
It's like, I know way more than that. But it's the people who are like, wow, I think I could really learn from this, because I may not have climbed that hard, but I climbed 13 something. So, and I've been climbing for a long time. I've taken lots of falls. So, that's, I think the more everyday climbers who maybe climb up to 10 or 11 kind of really see what I do, and they like it and they can relate to me. And I keep things fun. My workshops are flipping fun. That's one of my objectives. If you ain't having fun, it ain't getting done.
Well, the thing too is that, I've always noticed is that what you just described, and if you wanted to break through from 11 to 12, that has traditionally been this very big hurdle. And I think it's easy to think that because of the way we consume climbing media, that 512 is not hard anymore. Because of the way people climb, it seems like, again, that they come out of the womb climbing much, much harder than that. But our friend, or my friend, I don't know if you're friends with him, I think Andrew Bishrat.
Oh yeah.
We joke because he one of his long lost books that he wrote that's out of print or whatever was How to Climb 512, or it had this really crazy long title about how basically to go from 11 to 12. I feel like that's still this great big hurdle, and that people come to this roadblock right there. Especially if you're somewhat casual about your climbing, if you have a job and a life and kids and all those sorts of things.
And 510's that way for a lot of people who aren't necessarily, extremely fit to begin with. So and we see that a lot more in the gym these days. You could walk in any gym. There's a whole section of people who they're doing it for exercise. They're doing it for the social part. They probably will never climb 512. You got to do some specialized training. right? Some specialized training, like our fingers hanging out of small holes like that. I'm experiencing that right now. I haven't, let's see, last year I made a pretty good run at trying to climb harder, but then I got some elbow problem in the fall, and then I got a horrible flu. And so now I'm kind of getting back my crimp strength, and it ain't easy. Like that's a very specialized strength.
So yeah, let's talk about that then, where, you're climbing and everyone's climbing, ebbs and flows, and it changes meaning, and you change motivations and everything else. You are retired. That's happened since you wrote the book. That can free up time. For some people it doesn't, but where's rock climbing for you, and what are your own personal goals, again, as we face aging and things like that?
Yeah, I've never been more enthusiastic. I climb 3 days a week, and it's not my time. I've got time to climb more, but I'm 61. It's my body. I need that amount of recovery, and just to feel good and stay healthy. So last year I was trying to climb a little harder. I wanted to get up to like 12 plus, 13 minus. And I was really getting there. I was up to like 12 plus, and when I got this elbow thing, so it can happen. You just got to really apply yourself. This year we're going to be doing some traveling, so I just want to get in that confidence level on any terrain where I could just walk up to, in any climbing area, just walk up to things that look inspiring to me and are in a reasonable grade range, and just go up them and have fun, and be able to onside them or come close. So that's kind of my near-term goal, is that general overall fitness level, to kind of be able to do that.
And do other climbers that are aging, do you see a lot of people looking at you and wanting to kind of get your secrets? Is that like a demographic that you feel like approaches you quite a bit on this, or not?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've got a lot of people on Facebook who, some of them I met, some of them I haven't met. And there's a lot of us out there, 50 plus, who are in the game. We want to stay in the game. It's, and those who are pretty successful at it, the other people want to know what they're doing, right? And so here's what I'll share with you. One thing I've learned that's relatively new. I would say I've learned this in the past 5, 6, 7 years, that I used to pretty much be able to eat and drink whatever I wanted to. And I just did enough climbing or whatever that I could always maintain like a pretty good level of fitness, and my clothes fit and everything. And I've just found that I have to pay more attention to that now. And the past couple of years, I find when I stop drinking alcohol, that all of a sudden I start shedding belly fat that's been stubborn for me. Like, I could exercise till I'm blue in the face. I could watch what I eat till I'm blue in the face. And I want to have an expert on that on my podcast, because I want to learn about that. I have a feeling there's some metabolic things in the high sugars and everything that are involved in that it, like, I stop and I start melting away. So that has been kind of a secret for me. That's really been super helpful. And I'm also finding that when I do that, my motivation increases, my anxiety goes down. And so I think there's, for me, that really has been helpful. Was
it something that was tricky? I mean, is it a part of your life? I mean, not as far as like, a problem, but like,
no, it's
socially and everything else.
Things
like,
my wife and I would do, right? It's Friday night, date night, get a bottle of wine, have a cocktail, whatever. And so that's been challenging to navigate, right? But I think once you start and you see, I just see what happens, and I'm like, well, okay, I want to get there. And by the way, it's really hard to get there any other way. And so, for a month, 2 months, 3 months, make the change. And it's just remarkable for me. So I want to learn more about that, because I always thought calorie is a calorie, right? Right. But I think there's something more subtle in there. So I want to learn a little bit more about that.
Well, I mean, I think all the research is showing it's poison.
Yeah.
Like, you're just poisoning yourself on all different levels. And like it turns out that whole a glass of wine thing a day was completely bullshit, and was basically funded by the alcohol and wine industry. So it's kind of interesting that, like, the health benefits will go way beyond whether or not you can climb 13A again or not.
Yeah, exactly. And so again, it's I look at where I want to be. I want to be as healthy as I can. I want to continue to do what I want as long as possible. I want to avoid any of the nasty things. Here's another thing: as you get into your 60s, you start looking around. You start feeling people around you who are your age starting to come down with some things that are hard. Life-changing medical things. And so you start getting a little more conscious of my actions. Like maybe I should try harder, at some things, like getting the right kinds of exercise, maybe watching more how I eat, maybe being a little more careful with injury prevention, maybe stretching more. And so that's kind of been kind of a wave for me in the last couple of years. And so it's been something I'm thinking a lot about.
Yeah, it's fascinating too with the alcohol thing about how, and this show is part of it. We joke around about it all the time, and I've had a whiskey sponsor, and we started this podcast. We were talking about your buddy's margaritas at post climbing. It's it really is, at least with outdoor climbing, it really is kind of in the fiber. The kind of like hanging out, drinking beers after climbing sort of thing is. I mean, in rifle, it's almost. It's almost like an institutional thing you have to do when you're there in a weird way. And it's kind of fascinating, like look at it and be like, well, geez, it's completely detrimental to what our pursuit is. But it's also like back to having fun.
It's also fun,
it's
right?
Camaraderie to
exactly,
drink beers with your friends after a day of climbing kind of thing.
And Vertical Mind, one of the things was margaritas, right? Jeff and I sit around drinking margaritas. So, right. And I would not want to do that for the world. It's just when I look at what my objectives are and what my challenges are, how just changing one thing can make a big difference sometimes. And you just got to ask yourself, what do I want to do?
So how do people figure out when this maybe docuseries is coming out, if it does, and things like that? Like, how do they connect with you, Don?
So probably best thing to do is you can follow Inside the Vertical Mind podcast, because I'll be talking a lot about that. That's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music.
All the things.
Yep. Or you can go to verticalmind.show is a website where we'll be doing updates on the progress for that.
Cool.
Also follow me on Instagram at Inside the Vertical Mind. Okay,
cool. Awesome, Don. Well, thanks for coming back on the show. Did we miss anything?
No, absolutely. I want to congratulate you again on 277, is it?
No, I think we're at 84 actually now.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I think that's the one I just posted. So yeah, they just pile up like fucking driftwood, man. I can't keep up with how many there are too.
10 years ago, we went from episode 61. Now we're at 280 something. So there was in the meantime, there was Enormo baby, which is now Enormo toddler, I would imagine.
Yeah, no, he's 8.
Enormo 8-year-old. So a lot has happened in 10 years. And
I bought 2 houses, bought one, sold one, bought another one.
Excellent.
Got married. I got married in there. I had a kid. It's kind of wild that it just marches on. It blows my mind. I'm sure like you've been talking about on this podcast, this kind of continued interest and people coming out of the blue even 10 years after your book was written, and it's just kind of it's fun and it makes you feel like you did something good.
Yeah, and you too. You're doing great things for the climbing community. So appreciate all you do, and it's been absolute fun catching up after 10 years.
All right, folks, thanks for listening, and thanks to Don for coming back on the show. And thanks for being there 10 years ago when people were pretty skeptical about what I was up to. You can find out more about the whole Vertical Mind scene, the things going on. Get the book, whatever you want to do. Follow Don and the Vertical Mind at Inside the Vertical Mind over there at Instagram. That's the best launching point. Okay, gonna load this one, spit it out there, and head to lander. So hope I see you up there. And of course, check your knots.
So what's your name?
John Middendorf.
And what do you do?
Well, right now I'm back into the portaledge design business. I've actually, just in the last 6 months, I've been working on this new portaledge. I used to do that back in the 80s and 90s, and those were used by big wall climbers all over the world to do new routes. Big walls are walls that are maybe 300 to 1,500 meters high, and they're big rock faces that you can't really climb in a day because they're too technical and too big. So a portaledge is something that you can use to sleep for those nights that you're up on the wall. 1992, I climbed Great Triangle Tower, which is probably the biggest big wall of the world in Pakistan, in the Karakoram. And we climbed the steepest and biggest face of that in 18 days. We spent 15 days climbing up and 3 days descending the face.